Hello and welcome back to another guide for Crown Wars: The Black Prince. My name is Syken and we're doing a repetition OBS guide. Today we're looking at the Duelist, which is one of the classes, and it comes with a special ability of basically having two weapon sets. You can switch between those weapon sets as often as you want. You're always going to inherit the bonus of the currently equipped set, which brings us right into the discussion: what's the right or the best weapon for the Duelist. So the Duelist has access to all of the one-hand weapons. That's one-hand sword, one-hand mace, one-hand dagger, one-hand axe, and it has access to one two-hand weapon, which is the halberd. Now the question is, which weapon should you pick? And the answer to that is it depends a bit on what the position of the Duelist within your team is going to be. So it needs to fill kind of a niche. If you want the Duelist to be tanky, then the sword is by far the best weapon for that, because it gives an additional bonus to reflexes, allowing the Duelist at the end to be the best or most reliable tank in terms of damage mitigation, because they have a 90% chance of dodging, and each of the dodges triggers riposte, which will mean that he gets a counter attack. So that is an ultimately very strong pick. The second pick that you could go for as a one-hand weapon is basically the one-hand mace. You're sacrificing 20 dodge for that, but you're getting the ability of allowing the Duelist to remove armor, and if you're standing side by side with a companion, you get more armor yourself. That means you're ending up with between 5 and 6 armor points every single round. The buffs of the mace typically aren't that great. Maces, however, will give higher willpower. You can see the sword, the mace gives around 15 willpower over the sword. So that's something when it comes to resisting AoE effects. I would say the sword definitely A tier, the mace in the hands of the Duelist more a B tier weapon. I would not recommend going for the dagger. The idea of the dagger is to dish out crit damage. The Duelist tends to already have enough crit, and the dagger itself has too little of base stats available, and typically doesn't have the ability to go behind the target in a meaningful way without wasting attacks. The Flawless Axe is another B tier contender for the one-hand weapons. It is a weapon that heavily relies on bleeding damage, so it can set up other characters like the Beastmaster, for instance. Most noticeable, the Spinning Slash ability allows you to deal damage in 3 fields in front of you, which is quite a good ability, giving you an additional area of effect that you elsewise wouldn't have. So there is definitely the possibility to build the Duelist with that. The halberd weapon is likely the strongest of, from a damage perspective, the strongest of the weapons, mainly due to its Mighty Thrush ability that allows you to attack 2 targets adjacent to each other twice per attack. So that means 8 attacks if you use both of your action points to that, as opposed to 2 attacks with other weapons. And that's just the base attack. There are other nice little features to that, such as Longbows, which is a really strong ability, or Hold the Line, an ability to regain lost armor points, which is strong for the character as well. My go-to setup would be Flawless Mace and Shield plus Halberd if you need armor reduction. So specifically at the beginning of the game, that can be important. Later in the game, I would go sword and shield, light shield, and in the second category, again, the halberd. The halberd is there to deal damage, which means whatever you're picking in that other category is more support weapon. And with the flawless shield and the one-hand sword, you're already reaching reflexes of 50%. You will see with the skills you're getting even more, 20 additional from the Master Swordsman ability, so you're at 70, and another 20 from skills, meaning you're ending up at 90%. Talking about skills, the Duelist comes with 2 different skill trees. One is Weapon Master, the other is Scoundrel, and whilst both are kind of serviceable, I always found that the Weapon Master is just overall better. And the reason why that is most of the damage from the Duelist basically comes from its ability to wield the halberd. And let's be very honest, in 80% of the time, if you find a good target for the halberd, that is going to be your source of damage. So a lot of the benefits from Scoundrel, therefore, aren't really that beneficial. So when it comes to each of the different categories, Weapon Master allows you to apply a couple of debuffs, prone, bleeding, and weaken, versus the ability to ignore targets' armor. Most of the time I'm attacking 2 targets, or I'm attacking targets that have already been stripped of a lot of the armor, so therefore easy pickings isn't that hot. I would go for Weapon Master. Parry is substantially better than Cunning. Cunning increases your critical hit chance if you attack a target from behind. That's nice if you want to go for basically easy pickings with daggers into Cunning and just really try to always crit from the back. But Parry is so much better. It gives you 15 bonus to reflex. It's already 15% less chance of getting hit, and then the bonus increases to 30 if the target doesn't have a positioning bonus. That means it's not attacking from behind or flanking you, or attacking from above. So that means you get another 15 off of that. So all of a sudden you can calculate to that another 15%, and then whatever the sword is giving, reaching up to 90% at the end. So that in itself is already good, because the evasion is fantastic. It's massive over just dealing damage. The next decision is Stratagem, which gives you Inspired for 2 rounds and Accurate for 1 round. In my perspective, a waste of an ability. The only action where I would use that is when you're about to ambush someone, you're giving yourself the Stratagem, and then next round you're going to use your Inspired, which is a slight benefit, I will say, but not that much more. Compared to Duel, which gives you the recovery of 1 armor point, and Taunted, you do have 2 taunt abilities. It's one of the 2. So if you want to be a tank, you are going to go into Duel. Also, recovery of armor points with that, plus the halberd is massive, because you're always going to stay up on armor. Then tier 5, riposte. Whenever you dodge, you do a counter attack, or you cannot get slowed, and when you sprint, you're much harder to hit. First of all, you're not sprinting that often, so that's really neither here nor there, so that trigger is seldomly. And slowed is just not a really nasty condition to begin with. The idea behind War Dancer is nice. The execution is unfortunately bad, because if you think about riposte in a nutshell, it's already good that you counterattack from time to time. If you think that you have 90% chance to avoid enemy attacks, and you're then counterattacking, then it just becomes crazy. There is no other way of saying that. And Taunt plus Parry and Riposte together make this character so strong. Which also brings us to the next tier. Distinguished Duelist allows us to taunt and ignore armor, which makes, if you're that far in the game, the mace a little bit less meaningful, because you can simply attack an enemy. On top of that, you can taunt him and weaken him. The weaken part is neat if they ever hit you, but the reality is most of the time they won't. I will say though that Disengage isn't bad at all, because Elusivity and Haste allows you to really position nicely, and sometimes this, plus going into the right position and attacking once with your halberd, is already all of the damage that you need. So this is serviceable, although I would likely go for Distinguished Duelist. And then finally, it's either Panic, which is basically an AoE taunt, and 2 times Valiant, which means less likely to be affected by any status effects, so your willpower will skyrocket with that, versus Executioner, which deals damage, and if you kill the target, it minimum restores an action point, and oftentimes if you kill from behind, you also get a movement point back. This is just fantastic, because it's one of the very few abilities where you actually get AP back. It has cooldown though, so you can't chain kill with it. It is the stronger ability in my book, specifically since we already have 2 taunts. And the reality is, and this I think where Panic is falling a little bit flat, if you want to play kind of a taunt character, you're oftentimes going to already go for duel and distinguished duelist, because stratagem and disengage are not that great of an ability, so you will skip panic. There is a world where you go 4 times left, then get the elusivity here, and then panic to kind of build the ultimate tank and position yourself in a way where it makes sense. That is possible. So end build I would go for is likely halberd plus one-hand sword plus one-hand shield, and then go from there. The itemization, in my perspective, bombs are good enough. Then later reinvigorating incenses. There is an argument that could be made for Berserker Tonic instead of the last balm. You're taking very little damage because you're oftentimes not being hit, so this is really just to shrug off status effects. This is to heal yourself eventually when you take damage, so the Berserker Tonic can be used as the third item. And that's really it. Let's look into some gameplay. Alright, time for the Duelist to shine. So we got this interesting setup here, where we have put quite a few people into a compact position. This is a spawn. We basically camped the spawn and waited for them to come. Duelist is in a perfect position. They were swarming him, so we're now having the option to use our halberd to address them. And the best way of doing this is just stabbing through them. So look here, 1 stab, 2 stabs, and we're taking a look. This guy is dead. So that in itself was 50 points of damage just with an attack, 23 and something here and 20 and something there. So that's crazy amounts of damage. Since this here is, by the way, the a unique pole arm, it deals just a little bit more damage than you normally would do, but for the purpose of this video, it's just as good as anything else. Could have, I played that suboptimal, could have used Executioner here for a kill, then moved up and then continued to step the back line. So there would have been even more than I could have done, but we completely killed 2 enemies, endgame enemies, 60 hit points and 56 hit points. So that was really, really good. The damage is crazy. Now, for the end of this, we're still positioning ourselves with the sword, making it difficult for this priest here to get around us. And with the sword, we're having a 90% avoidance. We're still having a movement action left over, so depending on how this is playing out, we're going to maybe move into a different spot. But that is, I would say, the damage side. Let's see if we can get a bit of footage for the Duelist tanking. Alright, so we're finding ourselves in a situation where there's a big fight in one side of the cathedral, and on the other side the Duelist has isolated the gunner. If you're isolating ranged characters in melee, you can still riposte them. If you are getting shot from range, you cannot riposte them. And I'm hoping to get a bit of footage for the capabilities of the character. You can see enemies already weakened. What we would want to do is we want to definitely let the enemy stay on us. So there is the duel. Didn't work out, but luckily no one is near us. And now it's just a matter of how can we deal as much damage as possible. In this case, we are going to use our standard strike, 34 crit. So he's almost dead. We're now switching to sword stance. As we are in sword stance, there is the positioning bonus. No positioning bonus of the enemy means 30% avoidance, and we're currently at a huge advantage over them. And we're just going to end the turn here to see how well our tanking is going to go. Reinforcements are irrelevant for what I'm trying to show. There is the riposte. You hear the slash. There is the riposte. And we've taken 0 damage, while the enemy has taken quite a bit of damage. As a matter of fact, they killed themselves. So we started with 50 hit points, essentially dealt around 35-40 hit points against them, and then another 15 with the riposte. If you're positioning the Duelist in strategic choke points, then multiple enemies will engage them, and with that situation you can really benefit from the riposte. There is no upper limit on riposte attacks, which really makes the character arguably the most tanky endgame character. Works on bosses as well, which makes it so good, because once you do have that sweet high hitting boss on you and they are missing almost every attack, that's just an incredibly satisfying feeling. Thanks a lot for watching. I hope you enjoyed the Duelist guide. Check out one of the other guides that I do have. Leave a comment and a like down below. You know the drill, and see you in the next episode. Bye bye.